Hello and welcome to a special edition of Dialogue. I'm Xu Qinduo.
Welcome to this special program. I'm Wang Guan in Beijing. So good to see all of you here.
Well, China, Japan, and South Korea have been growth engines in East Asia. As the three countries review the past decades of ties and look to the future, the young generation plays a pivotal role in shaping the relationship among the three nations and influencing the development in Northeast Asia. Our program had joined hands with the Jeju Forum to co-produce a special program themed Northeast Asia exchanges through the eyes of the future generation.
Indeed, the youth is at the center of this all. That's why we've invited young people from China, Japan, and South Korea to have a free-ranging conversations, asking them about the things that are important to them, and also asking them about their hopes and dreams for the future. First of all, let me introduce our youth panelists. They are Tina Huang, multilingual host, Li Jingjing, CGTN reporter and vlogger. Hi, Jingjing, good to see you again. And Mao Dong, stand-up comedian.
And on the expert panel in the studio, we have Wang Huiyao, president of the Center for China and Globalization.
Also, we have our guests joining us virtually. They are Huang Jiyuan, current affairs commentator. We also have Li Jiayon, Yanqing scholar at Peking University. Malik Naibi is an influencer and CEO of Lime Education. And last but not least, we have Keisuke Nishihara, Okinawa Senshin performer.
And on the expert panel online, we are joined by Benoit Hardy-Chachuan, adjunct professor of political science and international affairs at the Temple University, and Jennifer Moon, editor-in-chief of Alicang News at Alicang TV. Welcome.
Great to have you all here. I think to start with, it will be fair and it will be interesting to ask young people in all of these three countries about how they really look at one another. That's why I have a group of reporters hitting the street in those three countries. Watch this video.
So how do you know about Japan and South Korea?
The cultural exports of their countries, and watching Korean and Japanese TV dramas.
We do learn about China and Japan when we were young at school.
They're the neighboring countries.
They have like similar cultures, like such as like makeup or clothes, like in fashion.
There are differences in the way we think, and of course, language.
We share Confucianism and Buddhist cultures.
When it comes to China, large scale comes to me. When it comes to Japan, delicacy comes to mind.
For example, during the period of time in Japan, it had a strong economy, the so-called Four Asian Tigers.
I am worried about Japan suffering economically and lacking resources.
Undoubtedly, we've seen Chinese society react with a kind of culture shock to Japan and South Korea.
But looking at news, I worry about China-Japan relations.
I haven't been to China or Korea. Personally, I don't want to go.
Why?
Maybe because I've gotten the impression that we are not on good terms. So personally, I don't want to go.
The three countries now have quite distinctive characteristics because they now have different political ideas and religious beliefs.
A lot of youth are worried about their unclear future, the rising prices of housing in Seoul, lack of job opportunities.
I met my friends based on the stereotypes of foreigners in Korea. I thought Chinese people would stand out on their opinion and Japanese would be reluctant to express their idea. But they were not what I expected. They were both cooperative and active at both conferences and contests. So we made meaningful results. So we're still now good friends so far.
All right, that's young people on the street of China, South Korea, and Japan. We do have more young people sitting with us here in the Beijing studio. Let me start with you, Tina.
Yeah.
When you think about Japan and South Korea, what do you think, and how would you reflect on the commonalities versus the differences as a Chinese?
Well, as a Chinese, first we are neighbors, right? We're close to each other, and I think we have a lot in common. Like we all influenced by Confucian culture. We're all influenced by the pop culture as well. You know, like a lot of
like the Squid Game.
Yeah. Oh my God.
The number one show on Netflix, right? Who would have thought?
Yeah, that was so popular. You know, like a lot of Chinese girls, they like, you know, like K-pop, some Japanese movies and films, and I know some, you know, foreigners who like Chinese food. So I think, well, we kind of, we're really, we're closer to each other than before because of the internet and stuff. So yeah, I think we're just, we're close neighbors.
I think we three countries, the people of these three countries have huge pride in our national identity.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I think we are very similar because when you hang out with Asians, either from Japan and South Korea, you realize you are so on the same page on so many things. For example, you prefer KTVs.
Oh yeah, KTVs. Barbecues.
I don't need to explain the differences
Hot
between
pot, I might add.
Of course.
And each country has its own hot pot. Like Japanese hot pot versus Korean hot pot versus Chinese, and we're all different.
Yeah.
Oh, Thai food is good.
So when you hang out together, you don't need to explain a lot of things. You are so on the same page because sometimes you want to hang out with Westerners. You have to explain this is authentic Chinese food, this is authentic Japanese food, and what's good about it, why this music is good, why the movie is good. But when we hang out with the Asians, we all watch the same TV.
The problem also.
Listen to the same songs. Yeah. So that moment you realize we are also quite same on some levels. So
Yeah, Mao Dong, what about you as an artist, as a stand-up comedian?
Thanks for addressing me as an artist.
You are an artist. I watch your program, big fan of it.
I definitely agree with Jingjing. I think karaoke will be the savior if we have conflicts in the future someday.
The savior.
Yeah,
You go that far.
Definitely, our love for karaoke ties us together. But to be honest, actually, I've never been to Korea and Japan. But when I went to school in America, I have some of Japanese and Korean friends, and I definitely agree with you guys. We can communicate. We have many things in common than differences. We have common. We have common topics to talk about, and the only thing I envy about them is they have better haircut. But yeah,
better haircut. Yeah.
Who has better haircut?
Japanese.
Japanese? That's why I want to go to our Japanese friend, Keisuke Nishihara. How are you? So what do you think when you think about China and South Korea?
The scary thing is that, you know, the people that haven't been to either China or Korea, the people that haven't seen anything with their own eyes, you know, they just hear information from outside, right? And well, here's a little short story, but like even before I actually came to China when I was 18, the people around me, they were like, you know, hey, you better be careful, you know, like, you know, the Chinese people are going to trick you, or, you know, they're going to steal from you and all that, right? So the thing is, I think, you know, just being able to, you know, being able to go to that place, just, you know, see and experience, talk to the people, local people, you know, make friends, you know, you can see and you can learn a lot more compared to what you hear like at your, you know, hometown, right?
Travel helps, and to see is to believe. Jaeyeon from South Korea, what do you think? Your thoughts on our commonalities versus differences?
Yeah, so basically we obviously do share a lot of commonalities, and obviously we do have a lot of differences as well within the common features that we share. But basically, if you don't really travel extensively in the region, for example, if you only stay in Korea and receive information in Korea about China and Japan, there is a very high possibility that you are going to be limited of your sights in the very Korean perspective of viewing those two countries respectively. I've personally traveled to Japan 4 times. I studied in China, and actually it is quite astonishing to see how similar the culture of the 3 countries are. It's not only about the karaoke or the hot pot, but the very fact that we are that we're sharing these kind of similar tones when we compose music. We share a similar code of humor. For example, we use chopsticks when we are eating some food. So when it goes to the basics, you can only find more of the commonalities than differences.
China, Japan, and South Korea, there's one thing in common, is that every time these people travel to the West, they're always mistaken for one another. And the second thing is, they all get pissed when they get mistaken for one another.
Angry Asians. That's a trending handle on Twitter. But yeah, go ahead.
So I gotta say, I grew up, being very strongly influenced by Japanese and the Korean culture. So Naruto was the anime show that I watched growing up, and it gave me a lot of inspiration and also some insights to Japanese culture. And I was really excited when I first visited Japan in 2017 when I went to this comic book shop where I bought a copy of the original hand script of the of Naruto, and I was really excited because it felt like a childhood dream come true. And I think a lot of young people in China will feel the same. Grew up watching either animes or Korean operas, and I think for a lot of young girls, that's where they first learn the term love and how dating works, and also sometimes even the standard of beauty and the standard of what a good-looking man should look like. So I guess that's my personal experience with Japan and South Korea.
Very interesting. This is a fascinating conversation, I must say. Chin-Do,
I will
take it
go
away.
to Benoit. I'm following this Asian tradition of being polite to someone who is from afar. You're from Canada. Outlook sees most of the game. I wonder, what do you make of these impressions or perceptions, or sometimes misperceptions, probably, for each other among the young people from the three nations?
As the only non-Asian, but I've lived for a long time in Asia, and I live in Japan. I've also lived in Korea and in China. So I come to this conversation with, I think, an interesting perspective. As a lot of the guests have said today, there are a lot of similarities between the three countries. Historically, they've all had tremendous influence on each other. Japan borrowed tremendously from China around from the 6th to the 8th century. Then in the 20th century, conversely, China borrowed a lot from Japan culturally as well. Korea, as a country that was both a tributary of China and then a colony of Japan, was also heavily influenced by its neighbors. So we see it today in several fields, right? We see the similarities between the three countries in terms of culture, language, arts, legal systems as well. But there are also, on top of that, some very important differences. And I come to this conversation, obviously, with a different view because I am a political scientist. So I focused on political issues. And obviously, there are numerous political issues between the three countries. And there, again, the history of the three countries, and obviously I'm not going to go in details here, but the history of the three countries, for example, the century of humiliation in China, the history of Korea as a colony of Japan, the history of Japan as a defeated nation during World War II, all of this have influenced the way that these countries now see their place in this region and in the world. And it explains in large part the differences and the tensions that sometimes arise between the three countries. So I'm going to leave it there, but it's obviously a very interesting topic. I think a lot of our guests have focused on the similarities, but from my perspective, I see a lot of the differences.
A lot of differences. Jennifer, what do you make of the perceptions for each other, understanding, of course, historical context is an issue. Tell us, what's your response?
It's fascinating to hear all these stories from the younger generation of three different countries talk about the similarities that the three countries share, where as a journalist and as a news anchor myself, I'm always reporting on the rising conflicts and tensions in this region. But of course, while there are similarities, I have to agree with Benoit in that the three do also have differences that need to be ironed out and worked out in many different realms, including in the political realm, in the economic security realm as well. But I'm glad to see that in terms of people-to-people exchanges, we are seeing much friendship and much bond and similarities that these three peoples actually appreciate and enjoy.
Mm-hmm. Well, Huyo, I think having or being different is no big problem. The real challenge is really how to take care of the differences or overcome the differences or treat each other as they are, and then forge some friendship and understanding.
Right. I think that it's great that to hear all the great discussions, and I'm really inspired. I think the age of the year of more integration and also the shared common objectives probably coming, because why I say that, because Asia is rising so fast, and China also. And of course, Japan and South Korea are East Asian countries, and we have a lot of heritage and a lot of tradition. But I think young people are really going to be absorbed by this similarity of the rising Asia. And I say also with the modern internet and also social media, if we can set aside the political differences, you'll be really bonded more together, because we see that that China is the largest tourist origin for both Korea and Japan. Over 10 million to Japan, maybe 5-6 million to South Korea. So it's enormous. And I see also South Korea have so many Chinese students in China. And one thing I see less now is Japanese students coming to China, but there are so many Chinese students in Japan. So I'm not really that worried, because we have a great heritage. We have Confucius culture. We all use chopsticks. Yes. So we hope that we'll finally get absorbed by this great tradition. The history will tell.
Will tell. Back to you, Wang Guan.
Thank you very much, Qin-duo. You know, it's hard to talk about perception without mentioning the internet and social media. Are social media making young people in China, in Japan, and in South Korea more informed about one another, or more ill-informed about one another? Watch this video.
Probably easily over 70% people are getting influenced by social media.
In my generation, I think it somewhat makes all those people connected.
The internet makes our planet a global village. We used to have less access to information of foreign countries, but now, thanks to social media, we can see what is happening in foreign countries and what they're facing every day. It turns out we don't have too many differences.
Social media enables us to keep in touch with old friends. You get updates about what is happening in their lives, what jobs they are doing, do they have kids. So if used in a reasonable way, I think social media is a great tool.
When I talk to like my mom or my grandma, they don't know little thing about Instagram or those kind of even they are doing Facebook now, but yeah, they are really not good at utilizing all those social medias.
It's just increasing them to stay in the country a lot more. But I feel like social media has really impacted us to go against each other in a way, or view each other in a certain angle.
When I watch the news, I feel like Japan and China have a bad relationship. So I do not have a great impression.
It can also be positive and negative, which can let people treat a country or nation fairly, because none of a country or nation is flawless. They're all worth learning. Also, it leads us to remain vigilant and reflective, and reminds us to not make the same mistake.
Regardless of something intangible or tangible,
I would like us to become friends, though.
Now let's talk about this very important issue, social media. Jingjing, what do you think when you think about the role of social media in shaping perceptions and perhaps misperceptions too amongst these three countries?
You know what? I think social networks are making us closer than ever, but also distant than ever, from each other than ever, because it brings us together. We can make friends just through the social networks. I made a lot of friends from different continents just by exercising social networks. So it's great. But then the negative side of the internet is it really amplifies the very marginalized, extreme ideas, and because of you are covered by anonymity. And then people just try, we call it the keyboard warriors. Yeah. You start to bully people for no reason, and that becomes even bigger issue when you're facing people from another country, especially when you had a very bad political history. But then I also want to point out, because sometimes when people show another side of themselves on the internet, and even someone with express very extreme ideas, views on Twitter, for example, Twitter, we call it like one of the worst places on the internet. But then in real life, this person probably is a very nice person. But so nothing, no internet, no social networks can replace the human-to-human interactions. So even though this person, you probably don't like her online or don't like him or her online, but still you need to get in touch with this person, have face-to-face communication. You will see the other side of this person because none of us are just one-sided. We are very complex as humans.
Yeah, I want to ask another internet celebrity. Malik, what do you think?
Oh, well, first of all, as a content creator, honestly, I feel like social media has evolved a lot into a thing that I personally am not a big fan of. It could be quite surprising to
Man,
hear
but you
that from an
thrived on it,
influencer.
right?
So
you became famous because of it.
I guess right now, I think the social media is switching into this recommendation or behavioral-based recommendation algorithm where you will only be fed information that you like, and
That's
also
true.
you will hear information that you agree, and you get that assurance and reassurance that, and you believe what you believe is the absolute truth. And I think that's the scary part. And especially these tech giants behind these social media apps, what they're really looking for and what they're trying to maximize is their user, daily active users, and also their attention span and how much amount of time that their users spend on their social media instead of providing dynamic or diverse information. So for me, I'm a bit worried, and I'm really curious to see how social media is going to continually evolve into the future.
Fair enough. Jayon from South Korea, what do you think?
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree that we have a lot of like positive aspects of social media, and obviously it's going to take, it's getting bigger and bigger. So like we're obviously going to become influenced more and more by social media. And as the previous speaker just addressed, that social media feeds us with some information. It is very, I think it's a very valid point. And actually, they do recommend us some information so that we can exclusively select the information that we want to hear. And this only aggravated because of the COVID situation, because more and more the information available online is becoming more and more penetrated into our culture. And the social media is the main channel where we get our information. So we eventually become reliant on it. With regards to, for example, our topic of these three countries, China, Korea, and Japan, in the Korean social media, I see a lot of articles on China and Japan rather than, let's say, like a European country or some other countries in different regions, because obviously we are geographically adjacent. We share a lot of culture. So these countries, China and Japan, gets much more coverage than other countries in Korean social media. And I think that should be the case in the two respective countries as well.
Keisuke from Japan, what do you think?
Okay, so first off, social media, overall, personally, I think it's a great tool, great source of, just connecting. For example, you're just one click away from, for example, wanting to learn Korean, wanting to learn Chinese. So in a sense, I think it's more and more convenient. For example, like in China, you have multiple short video platforms that are just everyone's using it, right? And or there are other platforms where you can search for restaurants and everything, right? So you're just one click away to know more about the other culture if you're interested, right? So I think that's a good thing. But also there's a negative side to it, which I try to be careful much as possible in my daily life, which is, on social media, whether it's Facebook or whatever platform you use, people, I wouldn't say most, but I would say, some people, right, they would, post their glamorous daily lives, right, on whatever platform. And, and people would look at that and they would think, oh, man, all these people are rich. Oh, they have, supercars. Oh, they're living a fantastic life. And I'm here stuck in my own house, kind of, and that gives that sort of builds up that negative thought that, oh, everyone else is doing great. I suck at doing whatever, right? So it's like I want to be sincere and just real much as possible. And, I try not to absorb too much of, what's out there, all the glamorous lives and all that. Although it is, it's good to watch and all that, but still, I still want to keep, a barrier in between. I don't want to go too far into believing something that might not be real.
Yuan, your thoughts?
Personally speaking, I've never been to Japan or South Korea, but I follow a lot of bloggers and students on my Douyin account who are there. And whatever they post on there, whatever they shot, their conversations, those are very valuable source of information to me. And they do shape my opinion and views of the other two countries. And some of them have followers in the hundreds of thousands or millions. So they're also source of information to many, many other young people, or not just young people. So I think with all the informations coming in, and social media does bring us a sense of closeness that we didn't really have before.
Right. Chindo, one thing that worries me is the fragmentation of social media, for example.
Fragmentation, and also I'm thinking about the rule of the media. So Jennifer, I will start with you. You are doing news, like the media, what kind of stories we present sometimes decides or influences to a large extent, what people see or read, and even sometimes how people think about what's going on in a particular society or around the world. Do you have that kind of impression?
Yeah, so I do have a lot to say about social media and journalism. So social media platforms have, in certain ways, hurt the journalism industry in that it contributes to inaccurate news and one-sided news accounts by exerting a lot of control over the mix of news that people do receive and see. So I think a lot of the panelists and our younger panelists have addressed this already, but in terms of the kind of news about the other two countries that the country receives, it's very narrow and it's very one-sided. So but at the same time, social media is also one very important platform that we journalists need to make much use of to get our stories to our viewers and to our audience at this point. So social media, as much as it plays a big role in the way that we interact with each other, in the way that we receive news and we deliver news, it needs to be dealt with very delicately when we deliver news on social.
Well, it needs to be dealt very delicately. Now, there's another issue, that is, the nationalism, narrow-minded nationalism. When you focus on the negative side of another country, another people, you tend to think negatively about each other. How to deal with that?
Well, I think this is probably a contemporary challenge. While we're having the benefit of the social media and the high efficiency of communication, we do have those side effect. So what I think is now, maybe, all the countries have realized now, we probably have to do a bit more regulating. Maybe we should really fight the fake news circulating on social media. Internationally, all the government has realized that and they're starting to do that gradually. But I do think, social media is a positive force if we really use it well. And also, of course, we can really raise efficiency, really increase our communication. But what's more, let more knowledgeable people, let more people-to-people exchanges, let people go to the different countries. We don't want to amplify extreme, but really, let's get the culture right. Let's get all the big environment right. Let's go get all the political, build up some consensus so that we can really influence social media. I think that big environment is very, very important.
Well, Benoit, every coin has two sides, so is social media. Of course, we want to probably to promote the positive side of social media, to bring people together, to better understanding of each other. But at the same time, there are issues, as Huiyao or Jennifer mentioned, one-sided story, negative story, extreme views, etc. So, your impression, particularly in the Western countries, of course, fake media is a big challenge for a lot of countries, a lot of governments.
No, absolutely. And to be honest, even though myself, I am a very active user of social media, I would say that over the last few years, my view of social media and its benefits for society have dimmed and declined considerably. And this is not just based on my own impression. I mean, we can all see, obviously, when we're looking at the information environment, we can see the political discourse. We can see that it's been quite negatively impacted by social media over the last few years. But several scientific studies have also shown the disadvantages or the problems that are brought about by social media. You know, you mentioned the problem of disinformation, fake news, of conspiracy theories. All of that would not exist, or certainly not exist to the same extent that we see now without social media. And one of the big problems is really the business model of these organizations, of these large social media companies. These social media companies, they thrive on having as many eyeballs as possible on their products, on their articles. And what attracts attention is the kind of content that provokes anger, that provokes outrage. And obviously, these two emotions are certainly not conducive to dialogue, to stability. We see this here in Asia, and we see this in the West as well. So for that reason, I'm definitely more and more inclined to think that social media is having more of a negative impact, although I obviously see very well myself the positive impacts as well.
Interesting view. To be honest, I agree strongly with Benoit. I wondered, any of you guys, you mentioned about the two sides of the social media. Do you agree probably negative side even outweigh the positive side?
I may be the outlier because I really think social media is pretty good stuff. I totally agree with the information cocoon problems, but I think it's always there. It existed in the world for a very long time. It's not information cocoon is not appeared when due to the internet, because actually also the fake news stuff. I think because of the social media, it's more easily to prove wrong news.
To identify the disapproval. I think Modern mentioned a very interesting point is, of course, on one side you can strengthen regulation from the government point of view, right? At the same time, people would say, social media or internet is just a tool. It's really up to the people who use it.
Yeah, I think, we really need to create an environment. Let's compare to go high rather than compare to go low, or just try to attract attention for the attract attention purpose. So really, I think the sentiment, the culture, the direction that we're going to propose and led by the example is so important. So I think that's why we need a bit of regulation, but encourage more positive social media that set good example for that.
This is a very important issue facing basically every country, every government in the world. Even inside a country, you see sometimes the divisions because of social media. I guess awareness and also probably government intervention.
Yeah, I think Chindo, ultimately it's up to individuals. What you do with the social media, right?
The tool, right?
You have control over your own behaviors after all. And Chindo, I want to move on and talk about another very important issue, that is Asian identity. Like some of our youth panelists said, Asia is not a monolithic whole. It ranges from the Siberia North to the tropical Indonesia, from the Muslim world to the Confucius-inspired Northeast Asia. It's diverse. It's as diverse as it is expensive. How do people in China, Japan, and South Korea identify with this Asian identity? We also have our reporters hitting the street in those three countries. Watch this video.
Asia really covers a huge region. It's largely broad term to specify one person into Asian.
No matter where I go, I'm always being identified as like Asian.
People will judge you by the color of your skin, so they may identify me as Asian. But personally, I do not want people to see us as just this big group. I hope people can see me as Japanese.
The world that we used to live before the COVID, where the existence of Asian people, I would say, were not that clearly strong.
Due to the hate crime happening in America, they could feel a lot more scared traveling outside of Japan, which could lead to a lot more people just staying inside.
We should continue to develop the Asian network to deal with global issues like climate change or the new national security issues.
I feel like Japan is losing its influence within Asia as China is gaining more economic power. Keeping up economically will be a challenge for Japan going forward.
The three Asian countries have endless potential. We need to cooperate with Japan and China.
The peaceful and friendly development between China, Japan, and South Korea will definitely make our life happier without any impacts of war and so on, so we can create a new era together.
People just want one thing at the end, like they want to be safe, like they want to be happy, they want to like move on with their own life, and they just don't want to like cause conflict with each other.
I think it's important to find a solution together.
We need cooperation, not confrontation, because there is a myriad of fresh problems that we face in the international community. To deal with those issues, I believe cooperation and coexistence is the most important concept.
All right, very diverse views over there. Jingjing, what do you think? How do you look at this divergence in their Asian identities for some of those people in the street?
I think Asian identity is something we all need to work together to build. Something I want to because in a recent speech by the famous Singaporean diplomat Kishore Ababani, and he said to the Western viewers, if you want to understand Asia only through Anglo-Saxon media, you would never truly understand China, India, ASEAN, because they have a very twisted view when portraying Asia. And I think as someone who lived in Western countries, I agree, because I feel Asian countries, the story of not just China's, of Asian countries are underreported and misreported in a way. So I think we Asians bear the responsibility to tell our country's stories, our Asian continent stories. And you know what? I think sometimes when we go to different continents, we try to differentiate from each other. Oh, well, I'm Chinese, I'm Japanese, I'm Korean. But actually, you know what? Whether something good or bad happen, we bear the consequences together. Just name one example. During the COVID time, because of the rising Asian hate crime, some people, some Japanese or Koreans living in the United States being attacked because people thought they are Chinese. And some of them trying to say, I'm not Chinese, I'm South Korean or Japanese or from another country, why are you attacking me? But in this case, is that really important to differentiate the nationality, or is it necessary to throw another race under the bus? Because in this case, we are all being seen as Asians.
Yeah.
That's why we need to work together to push the nationality, put aside the nationality, all these things, and work together to build our Asian identity. So people from different continents will understand us better.
Mao Dong, do you agree in that we're all in this together, like Jingjing has said?
Yeah, definitely. Like Jingjing shares a lot about how we Asians need to do to overcome this difficulty. But I think the main problem is not for us. It's them. It's racist, right? Racism is bad. So we don't really have the burden to solve the problem. They solve the problem.
We need to make them aware about this problem.
Exactly. Awareness, I think, is pretty important. What's interesting to me is in the video, I remember that a Japanese friend mentioned he'd rather addressed as Japanese instead of Asian. It's pretty interesting to me. It's surprising, actually, because I don't really have a preference. I'm proud I'm a Chinese, but when I study abroad, they did confuse us as Asians.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel offended. I don't know. Maybe I'm just not that sensitive. But basically, I don't have a preference on emphasizing my nationality or the Asian identity.
I actually have a little different opinion, different approach on this. I think it's sad that we have to all embrace this one Asian identity. And honestly, I think it's not only Anglophone media, but specifically American-centric media that is really pushing this idea of Asian as a whole. Honestly, as a Chinese and also as a minority Chinese, I grew up just only identifying myself as Chinese. And I think, and from my perspective, Asian is only a very simple term that was only tied to a geographic perspectives. But it wasn't until I went to the US, I realized people were telling me that I am Asian, and every time I have to apply for something, I have to fill in my ethnicity and tell them that I'm Asian. And the idea of all Asians to unite together the reason why I think it's sad is because you only form a very strong alliance when you are facing external threats, right? The Asians in the US wasn't as united back in the days compared to like pre-COVID, but after COVID, a lot of Asian hate crimes and also things like that. If you look at Cali, you look at New York, a lot of Asians are coming together to protest and to express themselves. But that only happened under the fact that they were facing external threats. So I guess like in a country like US, you can only gain rights and gain acknowledgement and attention by uniting all the Asian people together. But I think outside of the US, we don't necessarily have to push that identity or that idea of because we share similar culture, because we all use chopsticks, so we should all share the same identity. I don't think that makes sense to me.
I think we don't actively think ourselves as Asians. We're most likely we think ourselves as Chinese, South Korean, or Japanese first, then Asian second. It's only when we are attacked, we are racially attacked on the whole level as Asians when we start to come to realize that identity more. And I really think that it's sort of I don't know whether it's American invention or just the Western invention, but that definitely happened. They like to group people by their ethnic or racial identity. Maybe it's because it makes them feel easier to identify people. So they ignore the differences between us. And also the same thing happens in Africa. I forgot where I read this, but people were complaining about in the Western language, we're all Africans, but in fact, we're not. We're South Africans, we're Congolese, we're Nigerians, we have a lot of identities. But when people want to simplify things, they just group us into one single thing. And I don't think that's really healthy when we talk about anything, culture, politics.
Simplistic views are not helping. They're not helping at all. Jae-yeon from South Korea, what do you think?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the previous speakers. I doubt that South Korean people will recognize themselves as Asian before recognizing themselves as Korean. And as the previous speaker said, that should be the case in China and Japan as well. So this concept of Asia is very secondary, but it still provides a good ground for us to develop a commonality despite all the differences, I think. I've seen some friends from Europe or Africa or Latin America that they identify themselves as Europeans before a citizen of a certain country, Latin American before a citizen of a certain country as well, Africa as well. But this kind of conception is way hard to be formulated in the Asian context because Asia is way too diverse, as it is very clear that South Asia definitely has a different culture than Northeast Asia, for example. But despite all these differences, I still do believe that it provides us a good ground that we can cooperate on. And actually, we have been seeing some fruits in terms of let's say trade, for example, like the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, for example. It's a very good example that we can actually cooperate as a whole. So I think identifying ourselves as Asian could be still a good driver for the regional prosperity.
All right, for more views from the experts, let's turn to the expert panel. Chindo.
Well, Benoit, interesting views and also different views. Some people are for Asian identity. Others, would say this doesn't really matter. But, you see also different practices. Like in the European countries, some people will say we are Europeans before we are French or, the British or the German. Here in the East Asia, seems that there are similar views. I wonder, what do you make of it? You are from Canada. When you look at that, do you have different ideas?
Yeah, I think we shouldn't be surprised that there are so many different conceptions of what it is to be Asian, what is the region. We have to remember, first of all, that all these continents remain, they're constructs, right? They're not necessarily ethnic. There's no ethnic boundaries. There's not necessarily, there are geographic boundaries. But when you think of Asia as a region, even knowing exactly what are the boundaries of the region is not very clear. Technically, Turkey is as much a part of Asia as Japan, China, and South Korea are, and they're obviously vastly different. So for that reason, again, it's not surprising to see that young people in this region see the concept of Asia very differently. The concept continues to evolve. The history of the three countries, the education that young people are subjected to in these countries also influences the way they view the region, and it will continue to evolve. Just think about, for example, the somewhat new concept of the Indo-Pacific that is becoming now more prevalent in Japan as well as in the West. This also is sort of redefining the way that many people are viewing the region. So it's an ever-evolving concept.
You mentioned about the geographic term. When you say Asia Pacific or Indo-Pacific, for example, but the vicinity geographically, they do produce something that glue the nations in the region together.
Yes, obviously, I think it makes perfect sense when you look at the ease of communication, the ease of traveling nowadays, the globalization as well, the ease of communication between people of all of these countries, while at the same time it does reinforce to some extent these more narrow national identities. And we've seen it on the panel today with a lot of the panelists hanging on very understandably and rightfully so to their national identity. At the same time, this new world that we live under does contribute as well to a sense of belonging to something that is bigger than only one's nations. And of course, when you face certain global challenges, whether it be the pandemic or anti-Asian racism that many of our guests have spoken about today, this can also contribute to forging an identity or a sense of community, a sense of belonging that is a little bit deeper and greater than being limited to one's own national identity.
Well, Jennifer, if you look at, let's limit the idea, Asian identity to, for example, the East Asian countries like Korean, Japan, and China. They use chopsticks. They have this similar tradition, cultures, Confucianism, Buddhism, for example. Are you for Asian identity? Maybe it's good to strengthen this integration economically and socially for nations in this region?
Well, of course, social and economic integration, there are practically speaking, there are limits and hindrances to that because of various political and economic situations that each country is in Northeast Asia. But what I do want to point out is that I actually find it very interesting that this generation, this Z generation, if you will, that of seekers that we've been hearing from, that this generation really self-identifies and values, individuals over organizations like country, people, and corporation, and maybe that is why Keisuke, for example, would like to be referred to as Okinawan. Jae-young said that he much prefers to be identified as South Korean over Asian. So maybe it's that it's that trait of the MZ generation that's being displayed here, where we self-identify ourselves as a much more unique individual than being, I suppose, being grouped in a cluster of being Asian. But I am also for the idea that we do need to strengthen this Asian network and, of course, the Asian diaspora.
Well, where interesting, you see this, there's a rising of individualism, like individual identity or nationality, and then with this a larger community, like belonging to Asia, I'm Asian, or globalization even, a global citizenship. What do you make of that?
Yeah. I think this is great discussions. I found that I'm a strong believer in globalization and in regionalism. I think, as we're going on, time goes on, as the future, is expanding. We will see more and more actually the larger context of recognition. For example, when we talk with Mars, we're all man from Earth. we all belong to Earth. We're Earth, citizens, global citizens. But when we talk about the integration of the globalization, So the regionalism is happening. We have European Union, which is still very strong, even though they're having some crisis now. But we have ASEAN, which existed for 55 years, which I think shaped some commonality and the culture there. And of course, we have East Asia and Northeast Asia. So I think this cultural bond, this geographic similarity, and also the tradition, the history, and all those things will make things more together, because also we now have CPTPP, for example, for the region. Now we are talking about FTA between China, Japan, and South Korea in discussion. So I think this regionalism, this Asian community is taking shape, because we have to, because the Asian is rising. We are so dependent on each other. The traffic. Just imagine before COVID, we have 10 million people went to Japan, and many million went to Korea, and vice versa. So I see this trend will continue if we really stick to the open mind and the Asian community. We have a European community, Asian community, American, African. So the world is getting smaller. We have to recognize that is a fact. Mm-hmm. So we should be less interfered by this geopolitical tension, and let's talk about unity. Let's talk about regionalism. Let's talk about globalization.
You remind me of for example, China-South Korea relationship. This year we celebrate the 30th anniversary of these diplomatic ties. The trade volume between the two countries, it has grown 50 times. That's just amazing.
Yeah, let's face it. China's trade with South Korea, is South Korea trade with Japan, U.S. Combined is less with trade with China. So it's enormous.
It gave me a sense of how important this Asian neighbors there. Reminds me also of what President Xi Jinping often called for, the building of the community for shared future, with a shared future for mankind. But I'm thinking about the Asian community or East Asian community, because somehow your development or your future is closely related to each other.
I think Brenda is in Vancouver, but in Vancouver, you are more identified as an Asian community because there are so many people from Asia. Yeah. And same is true, I think, in America. So as we travel more, we'll be more recognized as blocks. And then in the end, when we finally travel to Mars and the Moon, and then we recognize as a man from Earth.
Yes.
The world is really getting small.
The community with a shared future
absolutely,
here,
absolutely.
On Earth
we're
and
on the same boat.
In space.
We're on the same boat, yes.
Yes, yeah. We're in the same boat. Well, thanks, Huiyao. What a fascinating conversation.
I loved it. We learned so much.
Absolutely. Well, with that, we come to the end for today's discussion. Many thanks to our guests for joining us for this special program co-produced by Jeju Forum.
Many thanks to Jeju Forum, our South Korean partner, and thank you everyone for joining us here in person and those joining us online. Thanks, many thanks.
Well, you can also find us on the CGTN app on YouTube. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much.
Time.
Bye and take care. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Nice discussion. Different views, young people.